it is in Congress, or most people in Congress, they know nothing about the subject, even if they're on key oversight committees. So this has been something that was a shock to me. It's going to be a shock to you. It's going to be a shock to the world and the American public to find out that the constitutional government in the United States since the late 1950s have been basically pushed aside and relegated to irrelevance, frankly, on this issue since the late Eisenhower years. And so this whole history we will unpack over a series of these episodes, because it's very important to understand the context of how we got from there to here. But importantly, right now, the crisis of the moment is that there are a number of people coming forward from various black sites, which are highly classified, illegally run operations in intelligence, military, and corporate programs. And those guys that I've been meeting with for about almost 2 years now, 20 months, have decided to come forward publicly, identify themselves, and in a controlled release begin to give the information to the American people and the U.S. government. So this is a very complex program. It's now coming to a sort of a crescendo, and this is why I think we need to be talking with each other every week or so.
So let's go to the first question, which is going to be about human technology. What is the real capacity of human technology?
Right. Well, here, the biggest part of this story isn't the extraterrestrial part of it, ironically. That's secondary. And in fact, people who have been in these covert programs that are very disinformation oriented have wanted the public to believe we're not alone, but that there's a threat from outer space. And most of you who are familiar with my work know what Werner von Braun, through his spokesperson for the last 5 years of his life, Carol Rosin, said when he was dying, and in 1974 said the whole purpose of these covert programs, one of the big overarching purposes, is to be able to hoax a attack or an alien threat and present the extraterrestrial presence as a threat so that they could consolidate military power, industrial power, and also pivot the population through fear into realizing there's another enemy to fight. Now, when you're doing that, it's a long-term psychological warfare operation, a PSYOP. And the best way to do that is once they figured out and reverse engineered the extraterrestrial vehicles, the NHI craft, as they're calling them now, non-human intelligence craft, those then began to be deployed in the late 1950s into operational craft that look like a UFO. For most people in the lay public, they're indistinguishable from a vehicle. And those have been used in deceptive operations known as false flag operations. And these include everything that's in the pop culture on the subject, human abductions by aliens, mutilations of cattle and humans, and all kinds of skullduggery. Now, we can prove, if you go to our archive, that this has been a CIA PSYOP for many, many decades. If you look at The Lost Century and some of the other documentaries we've done, we put that evidence in there. I'm not going to unpack all that right now. But the big story has always been the technology, because without the technology, they couldn't hoax the threat, which is completely false. Anybody with any understanding of this, and even members of Congress are saying this now, like Congressman Burchett and others, that if they were hostile, we would have been totally obliterated by now because of what we've been doing. And as soon as we detonated the first atomic weapons. So the real issue becomes, if they were hostile, what are we still doing? You know, and why are we still here targeting them and knocking them out of the sky? And we'll get into this in a moment. It's because they're not hostile. They're here to help us and understand us, but they're waiting for us, humans, to grow up to a level of evolution where we can live peacefully on the planet, become a planet using advanced technology, i.e. not fossil fuels or solar or what have you, but very advanced technologies in physics, and then join them out in space eventually in an interplanetary society over the long haul, over hundreds and thousands of years. That's their objective. Now, the objective of covert programs has been to attack these objects, seize them, study how they work, what's called reverse engineering, where you take something and you take it apart and you study it and study it and study it, figure out how it works, and then rebuild it to the best of your ability. Those reverse engineering programs started in the 1940s, and they hit really major pay dirt, let's say, results in October of 1954 when they mastered gravity control. We have that information from the top scientists at the Naval Research Labs, the biggest Department of Defense labs in the world, who saw that document in, quote, the vault some years ago in the 1990s and informed us about that. So I think most of the problems we're going to run into with disclosure is that neither the president nor the Congress nor the general public and media understand what the technologies are that have been figured out already that can be used in deceptive and, you know, malicious ways. So I think this is why we have to have this conversation now, because those systems, not only have they already been used to create the specter of a danger from outer space, and never mind Hollywood and the media and everything ufological being very terrifying to the general public. But I think that with this coming out, there's a big risk that they will start hitting buttons to make more and more false flag operations happen. And the only way they can get away with that is by the populace and our leaders being tricked. And the only way you can prevent people from being tricked is having the knowledge, the facts of what we actually have. So that's what I want to talk about for just a moment. Now, imagine this, just put this in your paradigm. The week that the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the fabled director of that, Ben Rich, was passing away, he told a member of our team and a friend of mine, James Goodall, a very well-known aerospace historian, that we had figured all this out. And this is now 1995, so this is 30 years ago. And he says, anything you can imagine and anything you've seen on Star Trek, we already have, and it's not at Area 51, it's out there in the desert with the Lockheed Skunk Works. Now, I've been at that facility, and I've been there in the last 15 months. So what he was saying was that we have figured this out, but the folks who have, let's say, an overarching desire to control the population through fear, through endless war, through control of the energy sector, this is key, they don't want the full truth out, they want part of the truth out. And they want the part that redounds to their benefit, that serves their agenda. This is why in 1999, I wrote a paper, which you can see on our website, drstephengreer.com, that states that this is the disclosure that serves secrecy. And the disclosure of this subject that serves the secret agenda, which is what that means, is a disclosure that would present a threat and where they could hoax a threat, and then that causes the world to unite sort of around a dystopic totalitarian military response, like the movie Independence Day. Go look at that. That's right out of CIA scripting, against the ETs. So now, how could they do that? They couldn't pull that off if they hadn't figured out how these objects work. I will tell you that from 1995 to now, the man-made craft, they're called ATs, advanced technology, or ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles. They're used interchangeably. The euphemism used actually in the aerospace industry is just AT, an advanced technology, which of course is vague deliberately. And those craft at this point are, to even very trained eyes, virtually indistinguishable from an extraterrestrial vehicle or craft. So though that creates a big problem, because if we do not get those powerful interests under some kind of safe and peaceful control of those technologies, then those can be unleashed to stage, hoax, all kinds of problems on a number of fronts. So whatever you think, remember this, in context of the recent drone events, all kinds of events that have been happening, whatever you think humans have in these deep black programs, these illegal black programs, it's more and it's worse. Now, the good news, now let's talk about the other side of that coin. The good news is that this a controlled and safe release of that information and technology, which is the objective of this group of defectors and whistleblowers coming out in the next couple of days, is that we could transform the world economy and civilization to where we reach what's called a level 1 civilization that Michikaku talked about, where we're no longer damaging the environment. Within 20 years, there's no poverty on the planet. There's this big leap forward for all of humanity, not just the United States, but the United States would obviously lead that because we're the largest military and economic power on the planet. And it would also clean the environment. Visualize, if you will, like during COVID, when no one was going anywhere. And there were mountains in urban areas in the distance that you couldn't see for decades, and they were crystal clear because nobody was driving and there was no industrial output. But imagine full advanced technological civilization, but you have this wonderful technology that's pulling energy out of the fabric of the space around an object, what's called the quantum vacuum or 0-point energy field. And that technology is safely deployed to run the planet, to run your house, to run your car, to run African villages, to run villages in the rainforest in the Amazon so they don't have to cut down the forest to make charcoal to cook their food. This would be, within 20 years, the biggest advancement in human history, in known recorded human history. Way more. There's nothing that comes close. But that's why it's also secret. In other words, what I've been told by people in the national security apparatus who've been on the side of keeping this secret, and I've had many meetings like that, is that it's too good. And what that means is it's disruptive. You know, the internet was disruptive. Horse and buggies, were eliminated by cars and engines. Typewriters were replaced by keyboards and computer systems. There will be winners and there will be losers. But the real winner is all of humanity and the earth herself, because we'll have a sustainable civilization within our, well, I'm no just spring chicken, but perhaps even within my lifetime, where it won't even resemble the way the world is today. So it's a very forward-looking, positive event happening. But there are also these landmines out there. In other words, very powerful interests who don't want to have us go into that future could start disrupting that future. And this is why, in a moment, we'll talk about what else needs to be done by the president, the Congress, and the heads of states of other countries. And that's going to be a key part of what we'll be discussing over the coming weeks, months, and years on this podcast.